So can there be negative knowledge as well? So there is a economist, Fritz Machlupp, and he has written on economics of selling and competition, as well as knowledge, its creation, distribution, and economic significance. So this book is one of his works, and in this book I found one chapter 7. Okay, so it's called Notions of Negative Knowledge. So do you think that can there be any negative knowledge, or is all knowledge good? You might feel, oh, knowledge is knowledge. What is negative or positive about it, right? But not easy to say what can be wrong with negative knowledge. Why is it called negative knowledge? Is there something that should be called negative knowledge? If so, what is it? So let's see what are the different ideas of negative knowledge he is discussing. So some who have suggested the term negative knowledge want it to mean erroneous knowledge, knowledge which has proved false or will prove false when properly tested. Others have used the term in a different sense, namely to refer to knowledge that negates propositions previously or potentially held by themselves or by others. These are just two of a much larger family of notions that may somehow deserve designation as negative knowledge. I shall first introduce and then discuss several members of this family: erroneous knowledge, contradicted knowledge, contradicting knowledge, obsolete knowledge, alternative knowledge, rejected knowledge, inadequately supported knowledge, questionable knowledge, uncertain knowledge, vague knowledge, elusive knowledge, confusing knowledge, and knowledge fertile of negative predictions. So here he mentions Frank Knight, one of the popular, we discussed this in our videos on the ethics of competition. You can search it in our channel. So he says, Frank Knight, the well-known philosopher economist, once quoted approvingly a humorist's dictum to the effect that it ain't ignorance that does the most damage, it's knowing so darned much that ain't so. So it's quite, it's an American colloquial saying. It's not ignorance that does the most damage. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. Okay, when we didn't know about coronavirus, and if coronavirus was latent, it was good ignorance. But now what do we have? We have so many ideas about coronavirus that it is also dangerous, right? So what is true about coronavirus? There is less true information and more incorrect information, or the damage is done by when the knowledge is not effective, and there is a problem in differentiating the right or true knowledge from false knowledge. I mean, not false knowledge, but you know what I mean, right? Negative knowledge. Okay. So but on whose authority or on what evidence can I say that in actual fact it is not so? Either you know better and consider my knowledge false, or I myself will find out later that I was in error. In the first case, we are faced with two inconsistent knowledge claims. In the second, with the prediction that I shall find out, or alternatively, a post-diction that my previous knowledge belief was in error. If we think that the term negative knowledge helps characterize these situations or sequences, we have to choose which of the two contradictory pieces of knowledge better deserves to be called negative. The previous one, which at one time I considered a positive part of my stock of knowledge, or the new one, the new knowledge claim, which contradicts or negates the previous one. If the negation eliminates a part of my stock of knowledge, perhaps it should be called negative. Is not my stock of knowledge reduced now that I have to discard a part of it? Does not the new knowledge, which negates the previous one, compel me to make a subtraction from the minuend, the quantity we diminished? And therefore, does it not constitute the subtra and the negative magnitude? Then he is talking of disproved and suspended knowledge. This admittedly is sheer quibbling. It does, however, lead to the question whether accepted knowledge becomes non-knowledge when it is successfully contradicted, or whether it merely becomes another kind of knowledge. What happens when knowledge is reprocessed, and what some parts of the previously accepted knowledge are found to be incorrect? What happens to that knowledge? Does it become non-knowledge, or does it become less than knowledge? What happens? So if something that has long been regarded as true knowledge is eventually shown to be false, it is not erased either from the memories of those who have believed it to be true, or from the written or printed records in our collections and on our library shelves. So when something which was thought to be true or correct becomes incorrect, then it is not erased. We don't label it as incorrect knowledge, we don't label it as false knowledge, wherever we were placing it before. So it just stays where it stayed. If the disproved fact, event or theory belonged, for example, to the systematic body of knowledge called physics, it will be moved into another file kept in the department of history of physics called another systematic body of knowledge. Seen from this angle, contradicted knowledge is not negative knowledge, but only knowledge moved into another file. It may be into a file for historical knowledge or obsolete knowledge, or perhaps, if many are not convinced by the disproof, it may go into a file for pending matters. So knowledge losing relevance. This is the second part after absolute knowledge. Not all obsolete knowledge consists of erroneous, contradicted, disproved knowledge, or even larger part may simply have lost its relevance or timeliness. Most of such now irrelevant knowledge was at one time true knowledge. Neither extraneous, neither erroneous nor irrelevant, but it related to circumstances that no longer exist. Much of it was practical knowledge, useful in guiding decisions and actions of a certain period. To give examples, knowledge of market conditions in, say, 1952 was of value to some businessmen of the time. Knowledge of technology important to an entrepreneur and producer. Knowledge of highway conditions to a freight carrier, and so forth. Today, all this one-timely knowledge is obsolete. It is irrelevant to businessmen, producers, and freight carriers of our day. However, there may be records of such obsolete knowledge in various documents, and it may be also in the memories of a few living persons. If someone wishes to call it negative knowledge, he is free to do so, but such nomenclature hardly contributes to our understanding of the types of knowledge. So he's saying, that what if knowledge which was useful earlier no longer is useful because the circumstances have changed? So what used to be current affairs in previous generation might be useless in that sense, that it is no longer current affairs, it is old affairs. So now he's going to the third, alternative knowledge, acceptance pending. So the reference to the logical opposites, contradicting knowledge and contradicted knowledge, which induced me to quibble about which of the two had a better claim to the designation negative, presumed a rather simple situation: the successful negation of an erroneous proposition. In many instances, however, we are faced with alternative hypotheses with no strong clues as to their relative truth or probability values. To know that something is either this or that or both constitutes knowledge, to be sure, but it is not sure knowledge, and it is not negative knowledge either. The hope typical in such instances is that one day, sooner or later, we shall find out But for the time being, things are not settled, and we must be satisfied that the knowledge of two or more possibilities is preferable by far to no knowledge at all. I didn't know what he was saying. Maybe he's saying that many possibilities are available in alternative knowledges. Demoted sciences, this is the fourth one. There is a great deal of rejected knowledge, possibly rejected forever, and no respectable scientist would dare to hold out any hope for its restoration or vindication. Among once widely accepted sciences or systematic bodies of knowledge which are now repudiated and in utter disrepute are astrology, demonology, necromancy, and studies of supernatural phenomena. So he's talking of demoted sciences. Once upon a time, there was a lot of demand and lot of scope for these sciences, but now they have been demoted, and these include astrology or demonology, study of demons, necromancy, study of death and what happens after death, kala jadoo, and studies of supernatural phenomena. Astrology is defined as the practical application of astronomy to the prediction of events, natural and moral. It was concerned with foretelling of natural phenomena, and judicial astrology concerned with judging the occult influences. Occult are beyond physical influences of the stars upon human affairs. Astromancy is this negative knowledge. I mean, you might have seen, people are still in TV channels in the morning. They have this, while having coffee, they will find out what the stars have in store for them. There may be many types of this behavior, but this behavior is demoted science. Okay, universities don't teach this type of behavior in Europe, at least not in the sense of the highest form of science, but they may teach in terms of historical astrological sciences, somewhat like that. I mean to say, not in a very negative way. I respect all sciences. So Webster calls it a pseudoscience. It is no longer taught in universities. I have sometimes been scolded for my ignorance in these matters. He is writing about his own. So knowledge of the influences of the stars upon human affairs is unscientific and almost certainly erroneous. So we will continue this discussion in the next chapter, next video.